you mentioned earlier the permitting process. That's such a huge part of it. What are you seeing there with Class 6 permits? I mean, what can people expect? You talked about primary term of these deals, and initially we thought, maybe we need 2 to 3 years, but very soon we switched to, we might need 6 years or 8 or 10 years.
Yeah. I mean, that's a massive part of it. And here's how it's shaping up. With the IRA, as we said earlier, the interest has just really skyrocketed. So many companies and potential storage operators have put in permits, applied for Class 6 permits to the EPA. The EPA, except for 2 states and almost a third, they are the ones that run the Class 6 permitting program. Now, there's the state of Wyoming and North Dakota that have gotten primacy, which means their agencies, their local Department of Energy or Environmental Quality, I think in both states, it actually is the one that runs the permitting process as opposed to the EPA. Now, the EPA, they'll supervise whatever, but it's in the hands of the state, which ultimately any kind of underground injection control program, which all of these, whether it's EOR or waste or whatever, really is intended to be in the hands of the state. But the problem that this has happened is that if you're not in one of those states that have primacy, and by the way, Louisiana should have primacy by the end of this year, but if you're not in one of those states, the EPA's backlog is massive and it is growing every day. And they have been really slow. Actually, there's only 2 Class 6 permits in the entire country that the EPA has approved and has been operational in the past 15 years. And it's just, and the backlog now is growing. So the problem for landowners to think about is that if you're in Texas, as an example, as opposed to being across the state line in Louisiana, the time that it's going to take to get a Class 6 permit in Texas may really be a long time. It may be 3 years. I don't know, but everyone says, 24 months. But right now, there's no track record that the EPA has where they can say, oh no, look.
The only track record they have is subpar performance, and slowing things down. That's the track. That's what you can't expect.
Absolutely right.
Yeah.
And so in slowing things down. Yeah, it's exactly, and even to get more, it gets even more complicated because there isn't a clear there isn't a clear view that even within the EPA and the current administration that everyone's rowing in the same direction, so to speak. There are some people who are ideologically driven who don't want to, quote, help the oil and gas companies solve this problem that they think they created, and so they don't want to help that. And so getting those permits through. Now, some people say, no, the EPA just needs more staffing. I've heard it both ways. So that's why there's just such this uncertainty around that timing, which is why storage operators, when they're negotiating these leases, are probably going to be shooting for a longer time to get that and a little bit more lenient terms to be able to, on that first, that first stage of, hey, what time do I have to get this permit? And so that's probably what you're seeing because the story is not great.
Lauren, you mentioned earlier that Louisiana was near getting their primacy, and I'm curious, what was that process like? How did they initiate it? And what does that look like for other states that might be interested in getting their primacy as well?
Yeah. So, I think Louisiana they were very early on, very progressive as far as recognizing that at some point carbon capture was going to be a thing. I think they were seeing this before, kind of in the 2019, 2020 stage, because it did take, I think, 2, maybe almost 3 years to get primacy from the EPA. So, they were ahead of the curve. Texas is kind of heading that direction, but is not at all. I don't know that they've actually had an official submission to the EPA requesting primacy. And usually there's a recycle, stage in there, and it just takes some time. So I would expect it takes 2 to 3 years. As I mentioned, Wyoming, North Dakota have it. Also, amazingly enough, Arizona is looking to get it. And then there's one other out there that is one other state that's out there that is also looking for, but it escapes me right now. Maybe somewhere in the Midwest, but not And Texas is not even kind of in the game yet. They had some kind of internal bickering about what agency would control that, and so that set them behind as far as submitting. So, and here's where it gets worse. I don't be a downer here to anyone, but I believe the EPA wants the states to have primacy because they they just do a better job of knowing it. And again, that anything under injection control is usually with the states. Now, so if everyone knows Texas is going to eventually apply for primacy, is there a lot of motivation for the EPA to be approving a bunch of permits when they frankly would rather have that beyond Texas? So what happens in the time that it takes to get primacy? Is there any movement at all? I don't know. I mean, if I knew the future, I'd be sitting on some island in the Bahamas, but I'm not. So I could be totally wrong. Maybe the EPA will move that along, but they may not either. So we'll have to see how that plays out.
I guess it's kind of where we're at, is a lot of wait and see, and
it is, unfortunately, it's a lot of wait and see. And I think that's why, companies and this is why emitters and every player in kind of the supply chain or food chain, if you want to call it, is a little bit waiting to see how the permitting sorts itself out. And I think this is a bit where, even companies that got in early, they're still at the permitting stage of waiting on that permit. I mean, they've submitted the permit, everything's great, but they're still just waiting. And so I think there's going to be a lot of people that are in that wait and see mode to see, how quick could this start happening, which is why you can understand why there are certain people that are going, look, I can get a permit in Wyoming and North Dakota, so I'm going to take a gamble on, putting together a pipeline that takes emissions from Illinois and takes it over to North Dakota. You can see the logic because at least that's one part of the project that is, very manageable risk, So yeah, that's where it gets on the permitting side. But so maybe they say, look, we'll gamble on the pipeline side and see if we can.
Yeah. Well, certain people will have different, rationale to where they place their projects, and that's what we're seeing it. We're doing land work in all these different places that you mentioned, for all those reasons. So hopefully it shakes out. I mean, you hate to see that much investment and time, get just thrown into the hopper only to wait. It'll work itself out. I guess we'll see.
Yeah, I mean, and there is, as we started this by saying, look, I mean, there's a broad desire, I think, societally to start mitigating our emissions that are going into the air, but it takes everyone working together for that to happen. So it takes the permitting side. You can't just have the IRA. I mean, the IRA was great and it incentivized people and the emitters to go, oh, okay, I'm going to capture this. But if you don't have also the permitting side, it goes a little bit to waste, which is really tough for me looking at it from a technology standpoint, because these are things that we've been doing in the oil and gas business. And, the first 28 years of my career was in the upstream side. And it was a very, very familiar process to be able to know what it takes to put CO2 into the ground. The physics are the same. There's a lot of the technology is the same. We understand the complications on safety and all that. And so, hey, this feels like a slam dunk. And so you hate to get it to the point where you got this great tool and you're just waiting on the government to get their act together. I mean, that's frustrating. And I'm sure a lot of people are frustrated by that. So hopefully we start seeing some movement.